Steve Wood. Hubbard was known as a writer to go off into a room and write for hours on end, even being up all night and pounding out voluminous works, whether they were stories or Scientology. Did anyone at any point demand Hubbard present some kind of proof or evidence of his work? Did everyone just take him at his word? Could this play into the fact why Scientology was never publicly debated or examined, because deep down he knew it was a scam and did not need negative publicity? In the first year that Dianetics was out, and John Atack would be somebody who could speak much more detail about this, but what I can tell you is that the first year of Dianetics was a year where Hubbard was trying to pay lip service and give some sort of demonstrations of Dianetics and its efficacy, okay, that it worked and that it produced results. And the Hubbard Dianetics Research Foundations, the places in Los Angeles and Elizabeth, New Jersey, where they kind of set up shop initially and had people actively working on this new science of the mind. They were doing testing, and they were doing IQ testing and some kind of aptitude testing. I think they used the Army Alpha Otis test or something, and a few other kinds of tests. And they did this in order to show before and after results of Dianetic processing. And they put this together into a little pamphlet or booklet to show that Dianetics was legitimate, that it had been verified, validated, I think is what the term they used. It was the world's only, they were presenting, the world's only validated form of psychotherapy, which of course was nonsense. But, Hubbard was never one to let a grandiose claim go by without him saying it. He had to put it out there. So this was something that was going on, and they were pretty serious about it. And Hubbard actually talked about in his lectures about how they were doing this testing and how it was validated and scientific. And it was all about trying to make Dianetics into a science. And a validated science means peer review. It means actual statistical analysis. It means research. It means case studies. And it means peer review. Okay, this is how a science gets validated. You can make any claim you want, but if somebody else can't look at your results and verify they are done properly, procedurally correct, that the math is all right, and then if they can't go and replicate those results or some semblance of them, then you don't really have a science. You don't have a legitimate claim. And this is a problem all the time, especially in the social sciences where, the number of variables in play in the human mind are damn near infinite. And so, controlling for all of those things can be difficult. So, we make the best effort we can with this. Hubbard didn't even do that much. It was just a matter of, well, here's some tests, and they have a before and an after, and it's better after, so therefore we're legit. Prior to that, he had asserted that he had a series of case studies that he had done, which he put together prior to his publication of Dianetics. It was in this other book that's now known as Dianetics, the Original Thesis. At the time, it was called Abnormal Dianetics, and this was the paper that Hubbard wrote with case studies at the end, which were supposed to prove this was the thing he sent to the American Medical Association and the American Psychological Association and said, hey, this is legit stuff. Well, his case studies were like a paragraph summary of a case study. It wasn't, here's the original paperwork, here's all the notes, here's the research. None of that was included. I don't know if it even exists. If it does, it's hidden away, stashed up in Hubbard's archives at the Gold Base or wherever the Church of Spiritual Technology holds on to that stuff. I really don't know exactly where that stuff is, maybe multiple locations, but it certainly was never presented to the scientific community for review, is my point. And after the first year with Dianetics, Scientology didn't even exist yet, but with Dianetics being lambasted by scientists who were trying to review it or who read Dianetics and talked to people who'd practiced Dianetics, there were a lot of articles being written back in that time, 1950, 1951, even 1952, where people tried to do some study or some research using Dianetics, and none of them validated it at all. It was, Hubbard's writing is laborious and difficult and kind of ridiculous in many ways. It is the exact opposite of academic writing. I now know a little bit about this, right? And Hubbard's writing is very unclear and very uncertain in a field where you need to, he made very certain statements. He said, this stuff works. Psychosomatic illnesses make up 75 or 80% of all illnesses. But then where's the citation? Where's the proof? Where's the evidence that 75% of all illnesses are psychosomatic in nature? He just throws these kind of claims out there and expects people to believe him. And laymen did, scientists didn't. Engineers, unfortunately, did. But real scientists, people who practice science and the scientific method, they didn't really go for that very much. At least a bunch of them didn't. Now, and so we had critical papers and that sort of thing about this. You mentioned in your original version of the question that there was this poor woman who had been shown in, I think it was July or August of 1950. She was displayed at the Shrine Theater as the world's first clear Sonia Bianca, I think her name was. And she was on stage with, 4,000 or 5,000. I guess it was a packed place. And the shrine holds about 5,500 people. So she was, standing there on stage with L. Ron Hubbard in front of all these people. And he turned and he was wearing a tie. And he asked her with his back to her, what color is my tie? And she didn't know, much less she could not prove any kind of eidetic recall, where you have accurate memory. But Hubbard was making these claims that clears have eidetic memory. They have perfect, clear memory of everything that's ever happened to them. Well, that claim was thrown right off the stage, and people started walking out of there and thought that was ridiculous. So between that kind of experience, which Hubbard, I guess, thought was gonna be a much more amazing show for these people, and instead it was a disaster, almost on the order of Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy's recent symposium. If you guys saw or heard about that, it was about that big of a debacle, and so Hubbard looked like a damn idiot. And there were published, articles about this. This was not good for him. Then they tried to do this whole testing thing, concurrently, and that didn't really fly. And I guess Hubbard just decided, well, this isn't really something I need to be paying a whole lot more attention to. And at that point, anybody who questioned him or, gave him a hard time about it, he would just rip into them and rip their face off. And that was basically his modus operandi from that point forward. He would just sort of assert, of course it's validated, of course it's true, and it's so true and so validated and so obviously true, I don't even need to show you anything. You're the one who has the problem, not me. You scientist guys don't even know what you're talking about. And he would lambaste science and scientists from that point forward, right? Because they'd made him out to be a fool. And Hubbard didn't like to be made a fool of, but he was a fool. When it came to science, he was an absolute asshat. The guy had no clue what he was doing when it came to science. So he was very, very testy on that. And he would just use his vindictive, meanness to push back on that from that point forward. As far as I can tell, that was my experience with this and within the knowledge that I have about it. So anyway, I hope that answers that question, gives you a little bit more insight into that and into the history of Dianetics and how that became Scientology. And, as a faith-based thing with Scientology, of course, Hubbard also felt the pressure come off because it's a religion. I don't have to prove shit to you. It's a religious philosophy. Take it or leave it. And that was kind of his attitude about it from that point forward.